also go. This just goes and just to go a little bit, just a little bit deep into this whole entire thing about equity in music education. I'm a doctoral student now at Boston University. I'm working on my doctorate degree, the same degree that James Ray was working on at Port Angeles High School.
Mr.
I'm now
Dr. James Ray the Third.
right, James Ray III, right, Doctor James Ray III. Might add. Well, the same thing that he was doing and learning and doing all this other stuff, I am currently doing right now, and I am 1 year completed. I feel great. I'm now going to be a second year doctoral student. I feel like going to go up and go get my classes and all this other stuff. So it feels great. But one of the things that we really focus on in these programs is really addressing some of the things that never really get discussed in music education, which is this whole entire thing about equity. The thing is with equity is that sometimes, depending on where the student comes from, the environment produces a lot of inequity for that student. We, as music educators, need to make sure we address inequity as much as we can. And we have to be aware of how we relate and what we say. One of the things that one of my dearest Suzuki cello mentor people, the late H. Glenda Peak, one of the things that she told me when I was just like a mentee, we're talking like 20-year-old Bruce Walker who was a sophomore or junior at Southern Illinois University, Edwardsville, and she said, "You never ever want to comment about the child's instrument in front of the child," and that never ever has left me. And I am now 37 years old. So for about 17 years, I've always kept that in the back of my brain to never ever comment on the quality of a child's instrument. The reason why, that child is not paying that bill.
Mm-hmm.
That child is not responsible for putting the cello, picking up the cello from the shop, driving to the shop, putting it here, doing what it needs to do. That's not the child's responsibility. Okay?
Well, let's take that one step further. Not just the instrument, but when I was I did 2 youth symphonies when I was in high school, and the agreement was that mom would pay for Tacoma Youth Symphony, and my birth dad would pay for Sogo.
Right. Okay.
Well, birth dads being what birth dads are sometimes, that didn't get paid a lot of the time.
Okay.
And everybody who's part of Sogo that I've now worked with and respect them immensely, and they are doing good things to empower students. But at this point in time, birth dad hadn't paid for Sogo, and the bookkeeper comes up to me, a child, in the middle of rehearsal and says, "I'm going to need your music back, and you can't come back next week because you haven't." So I don't know anything about. I mean, I'm like, what, 15? And as soon as that event happened, we got Greg Allison on the phone, and he was like, "Please come to my house right now. I'm going to give you your music back, and we'll work something out."
Greg's amazing. Greg's great.
Those things happen in much worse ways in and outside of music, especially to people who don't look like me.
Right. And I understand this. I will, and we're going to go to that people that look like me. I am hyper aware that I am in an industry where I am definitely of the minority. In an extreme. Not just say like, "Oh, you're just in a minority, 30%. No, we're talking like a hyper minority. Looking at the overall landscape of classical music. I mean, Sheku Mason gave us a little bump, a little bump up, because everybody know that name right now. Because I mean, even me, I like fall over to just to look.
I mean, the whole family. It's unreal.
The whole family is just amazing, and so I'd like almost fall over every Friday morning around 9 o'clock when he does his live. Like today, he did a live Facebook live thing at 9 o'clock this morning, and I was all about it. I was looking at it and grading papers and doing all this stuff, and like loving the sound of like, "Oh, you sound so good! Oh my gosh, you're so down." The point is that I know that I'm not going to find a lot of people that look like me. And the thing is that I know where I come from. I know that, me getting a cello is because of my grandma. Okay, grandma paid that cello note. Grandma is the one that got me the cello in my hand. And of course I didn't take my cello back and forth, but that's the cello that I owned. So that taking the cello that I owned and able to go through and gain a master's degree in cello performance, with the cello that was significantly below from the area that I needed to use to get to the next level, I still made do with what I had, and I made that happen. And the bonus of all of the teachers that I've ever worked with, they never said that I was the problem. It was because of something I did. And that's so important, because students will use and work with and be resourceful with the things that they have. This is where inequity and music education highlights the best, where we have to find out where these things happen, and we have to find a way to address it. Address inequity in music education. Because, again, the child is not at fault here.
Mm-hmm.
Don't try to, actually, just stop trying to place blame and find solutions. Be a solution finder, not a problem solver.
And we're identifying the barriers of systemic, whether it's racism or classism, or just isms in general, is that where we think if you want to be a college level string musician, you need to have an instrument of this kind of quality.
Right.
Well, okay, now you have shut the door on how many hundreds or thousands of talented, ambitious, hardworking individuals that just don't have the access to a $20,000 instrument. So
Right.
Are you going to tell that person no because they can't get a $20,000 cello?
Correct. And that right there would be something that would just be absolutely mortifying to me. I would be just shook to my core, because that student was me, 1,000%. Like, I would be looking at myself as a carbon copy, because again, going through undergrad, I did an entire degree with a cello I didn't own. I really didn't own my cello until I bought one from Hammond Ashley, because I could finally afford it, because I became an adult, and I was able to save money working as an orchestra teacher in 2007 in Sunnyside, and doing that for 7 years, and then eventually moving over to college. I'm doing fine financially now, but being a broke college student to having an orchestra teaching job, and then playing and paying for everything yourself, not asking for parents' help, because just never really wanted to do so. I've always wanted to do things on my own, because that's how I was raised. And
how many people are going to college on mommy and daddy's dime?
I'm not doing that.
And they get 3 years deep and decide they don't know what they want to do.
I knew what I wanted to do from day one.
I was not allowed to move to the next step unless I was ready to commit to a major day one.
Yeah, I mean it's.
We're not sending you.
We have to. We also and Nathan, this just gets us off on a small little tangent.
Please.
I am a college professor, and I will be the first one to tell you that you have, when you're deciding on whether or not you should or should not go to college, decisions need to be made. If you think that you have a passion for being an electrician, I want to make sure you be the best electrician ever, and doing whatever the case may be. Electrician is a very noble field. My father is an electrician. I mean, these things are there. My stepfather is a truck driver, and is a retired truck driver. It's amazing. My mom worked as a chef, a pastry chef and a sous chef, and then eventually became a music teacher. And that's exactly what she's doing now. And legit, we actually graduated 1 week apart from each other. The cutest thing ever in 2005 to see mother and son graduate 1 week apart from each other. Nobody could have planned it. It just worked out that way.
Well, and sometimes the answer isn't yes or no. Do I want to go to college? I think the option that we deprive of students is not right now.
Right.
Maybe right now, you don't know who you are as a person. You've never had a job. I'm thinking of some of the kids that I teach. They have been provided for reasonably well by their family. but
Right.
not really encouraged to pursue any particular path. So
Hey,
take some classes at community college.
hey,
There's
let me tell you what. Seriously, if I would have had running start when I was a student, and like I mean, I took AP classes and honors classes because I'm stressing myself out for
not the
all these.
same. Not
That
the same.
it's not the same at all. I mean, if I would have known about running start, I might have actually done running start as long as I could have done orchestra. Now listen, let's not get this twisted. Things would have we would have exploded. Things would have been exploding if I could not have my daily
Oh,
dose of orchestra
well,
and Mary White. Like I would
Joe
not
did,
have
will
survived.
still probably hold it over my head that every Wednesday I had to leave orchestra 5 minutes early to get to Japanese on time.
Ooh. But the point is that Running Start is was a wonderful program, and as long as I was able to still participate in all my music classes and did the things that were very essential to my core as a human, music was the core of my existence at that time, and I knew this, and I knew that what I was going to major in my senior year of high school. I said I was going to be a music teacher. Boom, I already knew it, and so that's when I joined marching band as well, learned how to play the euphonium. I did orchestra, and then I also was an orchestra officer. And I mean, like there was all these things that were very focused on trying to be a music teacher my senior year of high school. Great, but if I would have known about running start and been able to grab all those credits before becoming I would have taken it. I was mature enough to actually do the level of work that's necessary at the college level. That was never the problem. The issue is that we didn't have that. But now that if I was a student now and I would totally do running start, and I would totally want those things to happen if I was one of those students who was academically motivated intrinsically, not extrinsically of like I'm going to get an A and that's my motivation. No, I need to be intrinsically motivated. That means the motivation aside, wanting to go and go out and do this and get involved and yeah, because that's what I'm going to go towards and work towards my goals, becoming an adult and then working. I don't want to say working towards retirement, but listen,
Yeah.
retirement's that's legit. I mean, a 401k that sounds nice. I might not have thought about that at 16 years old, but now I'm 37. 401k don't sound too bad. I like 401k. The, the point is because eventually I'm going to use that 401k in about 20, 30 years. But the point is that I'm still making those things happen. And as a college professor, I run into students who have no business being inside of college right now because they have not been able to synthesize how to independently be successful with this work.
and,
They have
and
to, and
and it has
that's really
everything to do with agency. And that's
right.
something that we in public school need to do. We need to up our game big time about teaching kids to have more agency.
Right.
Because if you aren't choosing to be in college and choosing to take the courses you're taking because it aligns with the life choices that you want to make overall, you're wasting somebody's money, and let's hope it's not your own.
Right. I mean, seriously. I mean, and that's the thing. Listen. I'm one of these people. I will grab a sale. Let me tell you, something 30% off. I'm gonna do it. I like me some 30% off.
And then
I can
how
save.
much worse is that if you're wasting mom and dad's money with no
Right.
agency? Because mom and dad have told you you're going to go to college because that's what you're going to do. And now we are going to resent you after you eventually drop out because you didn't choose to be there and you don't like being there. And
Right.
now you've wasted $150,000 of mom and dad's money, but you were having this existential ennui of I don't know who I am, I don't know what I'm doing here because nobody ever asked you.
Right. And I think that those questions, especially when you're like 14, 15, 16 years old, these are the type of questions to ask. I mean, here's the deal. Do I want all students to go to college? Of course I do. I want everybody to become educated and do something that's going to make the world amazing. I need you to be amazing human beings. But don't forget, the world needs plumbers. The world needs electricians. There's nothing wrong with trade school. Everybody tries to like say that learning a trade is horrible. No, they make more money than I do. And that's okay because they're doing such an essential job. If something was to go wrong with my plumbing, I'm done. I don't even know how to fix a car. I have no idea. if something goes wrong with my car, I literally will put the key on the ground and then call an Uber because I don't know what to do. And that, but I just know where my deficiencies lie in home improvements and automotive technology. I can play F sharp
So
in tune, and I'm going to teach kids how to play F sharp in tune. And I can orate very well. I'm a conductor. You know, I will play Go Talent Roadie and roll on the ground. I'm okay with these things.
maybe a question that you can help me answer is I feel like we need to do better to allow everybody the opportunity to pursue whatever their passion is.
Right.
So, bougie kid from the bougie part of town where everybody goes to Ivy League, even if they don't have the grades to necessarily stipulate getting into that school.
I'm aware, yes.
If they want to be an electrician, we should not send any shame on them.
No.
And if we have somebody that is not from that background that has worked their tail off to go to USC but can't afford it, they should have the opportunity to attend regardless. So
Again,
how do we as a community create an environment where somebody that does not look like me has zero concerns about whether or not they can pursue the dreams that they might pursue, and where somebody who has a lot of expectations on them can feel empowered to achieve something that is outside of what the sphere of influence is told is expected of them?
well, this is it's a complex question, and you know, there's a difference between complicated and complex.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, complicated complicated things means that we can find a solution. You know, like making a wedding cake can be complicated. Raising a teenager is complex because complexity, there are so many different ways to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And that doesn't mean that it's going to turn out to be the same way that you intended to. Okay? Complicated things can be solved. Complex things, we can put it on a trajectory and we'll see if it happens. So the answer to your question is complex because we have to address several different things. One, we have to address inequity in education. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
The inequity in education when we're looking at who is applying to schools and who has the merit to go to these schools, and then does this school have a pipeline to allow students who are below merit but still meet that somewhat of that threshold to find a way into their institution? Or does an institution choose to stay elitist and not allow these people in? That is a question that I alone cannot answer.
Mm-hmm.
That is a systemic issue when it comes to education. That's a systemic issue, and we have to figure out a way to address it. And we have to have some really hard conversations.
Well, there was a great visualization that somebody put together on Facebook, and they had everybody on a starting line, and they were going to like run like a little foot race.
Right.
And they asked some questions like, take one step forward if both of your parents are still together.
Right. Yeah.
And then a bunch of other circumstantial, environmental questions like that, until they had maybe done 10 questions, and there were like 3 people that could just like basically step over the line.
Right.
And there were people all the way back at the start still.
That's right.
And when the guy goes to blow the whistle, the people all the way back, they got to run. I mean, how can we expect them to run fast enough to catch up to the person who just has to take one step?
This is the thing is that I will tell you that as an African American male, one, being male, I have privilege already. So let's just acknowledge. Just by being a male, I have privilege already. But being an African American male, there's certain privileges that I don't have. And there's certain things that I know that my grandparents in Sometimes my parents as well, but mostly my grandparents said that no matter what you do, make sure you do it twice as hard as everybody else. Now, of course, I didn't really know what that meant at the time when I was in elementary school and middle school. By the time I got to high school, though, I really knew what it meant because, you know, I didn't get to where how well I did in these in education. I didn't get to doing what I did unless I made that sacrifice. I sacrificed several things to not go out and choose to study, to stay up late at night doing homework, or then to go to sleep and then wake back up in the morning to do homework, and then do homework on the bus before, and then do homework while eating breakfast before I had to turn it in first period. Okay, like I had to sacrifice. It's not unique to students having to sacrifice. That's not it. But I know that the expectation that was placed upon me, just because of the way I look and who I am and the way color of my skin, the expectation was great.
Mhm.
And my family has been the support for my family has been outstanding. My
Mhm.
aunt somehow says, "Brucey, you are just a rock star. We just love you." And da 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 da. And like, it's great. And here's the deal: all my cousins get all the same type of love. But I will tell you that if you looked at from my environment where I grew up to where I am right now, there is no correlation that says that because you grew up in this environment, this is what I'd actually be doing. Where I grew up is I'm the antithesis of where I grew up. And
Mhm.
that is okay. And that is because my family allowed me to pursue things that were outside the box. And in this case, education, well, not too far outside the box, being a teacher or whatnot, but music teacher? Cello teacher?
Mhm.
What?
Well, now, and help me out with this conversation if I step over any lines, because I see things from my perspective, which is limited as such. Uh, but I think we are still kind of stuck, at least in classical music, in this like Jackie Robinson kind of world, where Jackie Robinson was, I think, the way that Dr. Robin DiAngelo says it, Jackie Robinson wasn't the first black baseball player because he was the greatest, but because he was the first black baseball player allowed by white people to play baseball.
Sounds about right.
And so I think when we see people who, of their own merit, are good musicians, people like Gustavo Dudamel or the Kenna Mason family, good musicians, but
Great
that's
musicians.
we white media put the spotlight on these people, and how many other musicians of color are doing phenomenal jobs that nobody cares about. Like we know about Samuel Coleridge Taylor, we
Yeah.
know about is it George Walker?
Yeah, George Walker. Yeah.
We know about these people, William Grant Still, but they could not. There is no way that they are the only black people throughout history that had a passion for creating music. There's
Hey, the revolution right now is Florence Price. Her music is making a resurgence right now. And we're talking like one of my really good friends, Jordan Randall Smith, professor at Susquehanna University, is a huge Florence Price fan. Huge, huge. And the thing is, rightfully so. I mean, her music is legit. It's good. And the thing is that it's been there the whole time. The thing is that we hegemonically in Western classical music, we are very, very blocked in, and we talk about the Mozart and we talk about the Bach. And don't get me wrong, I'm all about the Mozart and the Bach. My old car was named Bruckner. Okay, I'm a big fan of Anton Bruckner. I like Mahler symphonies. I want to play Schumann daily. Okay, I like Dead Germans. I like them. They're wonderful. Okay, but I also have to realize and recognize that I live in a 21st century society, and I have to also realize that there are composers. There are composers who are A, alive. There are composers who are B, of color. They're C, female. I mean, there's so many different categories here that I
and
don't
this
have
is the
to get
conversation I had with Dr. Anna Edwards, was nobody is trying to take Beethoven away.
right. Beethoven will still be there.
But if we want to enjoy Florence Price and Jennifer Higdon
Right.
throughout the year, that's fine. And we can
That's great.
still do Beethoven.
And even if we do this, I mean, you have to also realize that there's also multiple ways to play music. We have to realize that the students now are getting into like making beats and having that sick TikTok happening and going that crazy YouTube channel and finding out ways to express themselves. We have to say we have to stay up on this. If we have something where we have a beats producing class with some music technology trying to create this new fresh electronic music, and you're saying, well, that's not music, that just sounds like noise, it's like, that's not true. If it meets the definition of what music is just the simplest equation in the entire world, is just music equals organization of sounds over time.
And
That's it.
is it music is my biggest like trigger phrase in all of like the classical world of, is this even really music? Wrong question. Is it
Wrong.
interesting is the right question. And that question is going to be answered differently depending on who is creating and who is listening. And if it's not interesting to you, keep scrolling.
Swipe right or swipe left. Swipe left. That's it. Tender. Swipe left. Swipe left. If you don't like this piece, swipe or no swiping. I mean, you do what you have to do. Okay? But if you don't like Skrillex, don't listen to Skrillex because somebody else might like Skrillex. And that's the music that resonates with them. So therefore, stop trying to bag on their music and say, all right, I can see that. I wonder what that would sound like if we put Beethoven to it. I wonder what that would sound like if we put music that I like and put it in that format. And that's kind of what composers are doing. They're taking different genres of music, composers, and they're mixing the classical idioms, the Western classical hegemonic idioms, and mixing them together to create a new sound. What's that piece? It's called, I think it's called Reorchestrating Vivaldi, or I think it's Reorchestrating Vivaldi.
You talking about the Nigel Kennedy thing?
Oh, I'm not really sure. It basically it's like taking like, hold on, I'm gonna look it up because I'm on a computer, so I can do that. Oh, hold on, let me make sure I got it right. And I think it's that's Recomposed. That's what it's called, Recomposed, by is it Max Richter?
Okay.
It's recomposed by Max Richter. Basically, he took Vivaldi's Four Seasons and he recomposed them. It's a really neat collaboration. He took something that was very rooted in classical music, and he recomposed it. And I find that to be absolutely like, wow. And he used several different 20th and 21st century techniques in order to make that happen. Okay. Is it Michael Putz? No, Putz. Kevin Putz. Kevin Putz did this composition called This Noble Company, okay? Which was basically like, how the Elgar has the pomp and circumstance, and it was just graduation at your school not too long ago. So, that's probably playing on loop everything. This was a way to have the American
Quick
version.
aside, nobody plays the introduction to Pomp and Circumstance before the march, and that is the best part. Bum bum bucket dicka 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 dum bum bucket dicka 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 bum bum bum. Nobody knows that part, and it's better than the march.
I don't know if anybody else actually secretly does that, but I know for me, I secretly actually play like instruments.
Yeah.
Like
Bum 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 bum.
It's totally the wrong position. I don't really know what I'm doing.
Doesn't matter.
It don't matter because I'm doing me. I'm living my best life and being Oprah. I'm not falling down. I'm doing me. I'm making that happen. But the point is, especially when it comes to like like This Noble Company, like Kevin Putz, it's his response to pomp and circumstance, and it's a gorgeous composition. We did it with the Yakima Youth Symphony. You know, I'm music director of Yakima Youth Symphony, and so we did it with the Yakima Youth Symphony, and it was like a gorgeous, gorgeous composition to play, and it was so lush and so full, and the students really enjoyed it. You know, I am a really big proponent of doing music that is done by live people. And
Yeah.
and before this COVID-19, one of my missions is that for every single concert, I wanted to have a piece by a female composer. Every concert for this season, or a soloist is going to be a female. So like the in our winter concert for YYSO, we had Dr. Michelle Ron play the Brook Romance, which was gorgeous, and that was beautiful. This concert that we were supposed to have back in April, we were playing. I know it's we had like, and also this is the year of Beethoven as well, so we have a lot of Beethoven stirred in. So we were doing Beethoven Egmont Overture. We had two concertos, and also Doreen Carthritton Suffolk Suite. Now, this is pretty much a very unknown
Mhm.
English work by Doreen Carthritton, but it's absolutely gorgeous. And it's very accessible because that's something that I am a really big proponent of, especially when it comes to youth orchestras, is accessibility. I am perfectly okay conducting and doing the Tchaikovsky Romeos and Juliets and the Berliozes and everything else, and we do, and those things are great, but I also look at compositions that are accessible, that are something that can be consumed, and it can be rich and full and sustaining and provide sustenance, but also are not going to, stress my students out and also have them pull
Well,
out their hair
easy
because
to
they can't
play
play
and
that
easy
bit.
to read are different things.
Yes, yes, yes. Now, granted, in the fall, I tend to push my kids. I mean, don't get me wrong. It's like it's the fall, not a lot going on. Yeah, we're gonna learn this. Let's do it. We're learning Elgar Enigma variations. Well, we're doing it. Like it's gonna happen. But when it comes to the springtime, I tend to we still have that full court press, but it's not as intense because there's a lot more things that happen during that
There
particular
are
part of
more
the
demands of the student at the end of the year.
way more demands.
And
And
so if
I
you
don't.
can just create a concert that is like flying on a carpet
I
rather
agree.
than, head to the grindstone, that's a first trimester kind of thing. You don't make that first trimester push when they're trying to get their very, very late math test retaken
Right.
and, graduation and family things going on. You
Listen,
can't
I
do it
don't.
all at the same time.
There were three things that I never stood in the way of when I was teaching public school, and I still hold these three things today. And I have never had a problem with a parent, a student, administrator, nobody. I've never had a problem, and that is I never stand in the way of school, family, Jesus. Those three things. You got one of those three things, you do you. I'm not involved. If you got school because you have an ACT that day, okay, we'll find. If that's the only day and you need to use that for school and college and stuff, I mean, nowadays we ain't really got to worry about that now. But if that was it, I need you to go do that test. I need you to graduate. I need you to be amazing. Family. I don't outrank your grandma in Michigan. I don't outrank your grandpa in Florida. If you gotta go, you gotta go. Family. I never outrank a mama. That's simple as that. And then Jesus. You got something to do on Sunday because you got to do X, Y, and Z? Go get them. I'm not. I'm not in charge of a student's spiritual help and spiritual health. There we go. Spiritual health. I will feed your spirit for music and purposes and whatnot, but it's not my place to 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 interject and say this is the way you should raise your child.
Mm.
Parents don't like that so much. I want to be seen as someone that's going to assist you in raising an amazing human being. And this is an attribute that we will add on to the job that you are doing. Now, there are some parents that don't take this job that seriously, and so kids sort of wander aimlessly. So I will bring the sheep to the water to drink the music water, to
Uh-huh.
give them something to say this is something that is stable. And I will ensure to make sure I do that. Every student that comes in my classroom is one of my babies. You're one of my children for life. I will always find out what you're doing. Don't do anything awkward. I'm gonna find out. I'm nosy. So
Well,
that's
so
just the way it is. But
like
I mean, but
if we
that's
could
it.
just like back up just for a second here and talk
Sure.
about making, I think we need to make interactions with students like on like big ethos interactions between all human beings, but just teacher and student and like orchestra program and community. We need to become not just more culturally relevant, but more culturally knowledgeable. So,
Right.
like,
It's
for
very true.
example, at PLU, when you graduate, you don't hear pomp and circumstance. They have this piece called Processional Joy that this composition teacher wrote like 30 years ago. And my good friend Gregory Utz has been trying to replace it for years. But it that was written for PLU for their graduation on the occasion of one of their new presidents or something. And you hear it twice a year at convocation and commencement, and that's the PLU graduation song. And
Okay.
whenever I hear it, I get these fond memories of, yeah, I went to PLU and I know what that song is, and I could play it, blast it out my windows, and I might be weeping, and everybody else is like, what? I don't even know what song that is. So, how can we bring in our community to create like a pomp and circumstance for our community?
Easy. This is not hard. This is totally not a hard question. And you know the answer is ask. There's so many people that live around you and they're in your area that probably have this answer, but we are afraid to ask because we're the ones expected to have all the answers. And we have to realize as educators, we're not going to have all the answers all the time. We have to do some research. You have to get out there and do the legwork. For example, if you are working in Toppenish, Washington, Toppenish, Washington, where if you have a native population that's large, or a Wapato, and you have a native
Yeah.
population that's large, but yet you're the one that's going to shove Bach, Beethoven, the boys, and everything else that you learned into the school without paying attention to what's culturally relevant to your environment, you're going to have some awkward issues and some awkward conversations.
Well, and God forbid we have another Larry Clark situation where you're
Oh,
working in Wapato and you have a, a white person from Boston write
yeah,
a collection of native Wapato folk songs in a suite.
right,
I think
right.
you've got yourself a problem.
You got yourself a huge problem. The thing is that and I feel I guess I feel fairly confident about this. Is that if I didn't know something, and I did the research, and after I did the research, I then went to a person saying, "This is the research that I've done. Is this correct? I want to make sure that I get it right." By doing so, and that already tells the person that you've done the research. You're not just asking them to be Google for you. You've actually done the legwork, the walking around, the researching, the walking and the talking to get everything that you need, and then you're going them to ask advice, to ask direction. Can you point me into this? I would love to talk to an elder for blah 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 blah. I mean, whatever the case is, by doing so, all of a sudden you now have buy-in. Like you are now legitimately in, and you're trying to learn about this culturally relevant. We call it culturally relevant pedagogy. Okay,
Yeah.
having this ability to go in and do things because it is culturally relevant. You
Well,
know, like for
one of the
example,
things that I want to do next year, as soon as we can play together and get all 109 of my symphonic orchestra students on the stage at the same time, is there is an arrangement of Lift Every Voice that
uh
this
huh,
group from Oakwood University, I think Committed Sings is their group name. They did this amazing, almost kind of like Take Six kind of sound
okay, okay,
arrangement
Bob,
of Lift Every Voice,
okay,
and they do it in 5 part, so it would work out really well to translate for string orchestra. And
okay,
as I'm thinking through how can I make this happen,
mm-hmm.
the uninformed choice would be to just, well, the song's in public domain. I could just, listen to it and write down their harmonization.
Right.
That would be wrong on so many levels, primarily because I am a white person who has now taken the music and artistry of Black people and used it without their permission, without their influence. And I might even arrange it in such a way that no longer reflects the original intent of their arrangement and does not respect the history of that piece of music either.
It's
So
been happening for
I reached
centuries.
out and I sent them a little email and I said, I have been listening to your arrangement of Lift Every Voice for the past 2 weeks on repeat. I teach an orchestra in like a really white community, and nothing wrong with that. That's Port Angeles.
Where you
But
live.
but I
You should
still want to honor the history and that song because it's a great piece of music and it's pretty contemporarily relevant. And they said, "Oh, you're not the first person to reach out. We've got it. It's right here. You can have it."
Great.
And so now I've got their arrangement the way it is, and it did not account for alto clef, but I can make that happen and not feel guilty about it.
You'll be
Uh,
fine. Unless you'll be fine.
but just it it challenged me to go out of my way to make sure that I was presenting as a white person a Black piece of music from a place of respect and understanding.
That's great. The thing is that here's the interesting thing about privilege. Nate, like for example, Beethoven. I use Beethoven and Mozart all the time just because I really do enjoy Beethoven and Mozart. That's the standard. When we think of Twinkle Twinkle Little Star, Mozart. When we think of do 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 Beethoven, that's the thing that everybody learns top bottom. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
But Lift Every Voice and Sing might be completely foreign to somebody who lives in a community where that's just not happening. Okay? And all of a sudden, when it does happen, it's exotic. It sounds like, I've never heard this. What is this? And then they attempt to do it, but they do it in such a way that almost becomes disrespectful. And so then that's where the issues come in because they did not take the time to really do the research. What does this mean? Why was this sung? Where was it sung? Who was singing it? Who were the people? Where did they sing it? Those questions. If you can't answer those questions, then it's kind of like learning a piece of music, but really not really doing the research on the history. It's like I'm going to play this concerto, but I don't really care what it is. It's just notes on the page. No big deal. Awkward because now you can't really convey what the composer was going through. If we were to take Shostakovich music and just sort of play the notes on the page, no big deal. Okay, great. We wouldn't be able to sort of.
You'd be missing all of that dark Soviet ennui that makes Shostakovich what it is.
Yes, we're missing all of those things. I mean, don't get me wrong. Absolute music can be absolute music. Beethoven Symphony Number 3 is the Eroica Symphony, but it's still absolute music. It's music for music. There is no story, poem, place, idea, scene to go with it. Not like program music. Program music, has some type of idea, singing, whatever. Those things are.
But there's always a story behind why that piece of music was written, and when, and what was happening in the world when that piece of music was written.
Right, and Beethoven 3 is no exception. I mean, definitely
the strike through the to Napoleon. I mean,
like Napoleon,
big
you're
story,
a jerk, dude. Eroica, how dare you declare yourself Emperor of Europe? Beethoven was very politically active and had lots of opinions on what needed to happen. So because of that, that is one of those things where he just sort of dove right in and made that happen. I mean, that's not a hard concept to really get behind. That's why learning the history behind what you do and what you play is so important. If I'm going to do a set of Native American spiritual folk tunes for solo cello, I better know what the heck these tunes mean, why they exist, because when I perform, it now becomes my responsibility to make sure that I not only can play the notes that the composer prescribed to have happen, but I'm able to explain in detail all of the stuff that's happening in between. So this way, it doesn't leave the audience with more questions. I need
Yeah,
to leave.
and even the performance itself,
Right.
in the performance, you are representing what you can do.
Right.
Now I'm talking about choir in this instance.
Oh yeah.
So Anton Armstrong, if you know Anton Armstrong,
I know
when
names.
he is working with the choirs at St. Olaf
Mm-hmm.
and they're doing Moses Hogan, they
Listen.
do not black it up.
Uh-uh.
Nuh-uh. Because what they do is the Scandinavian sound and they do it very well. But if you're hearing somebody, from Oakwood, by all means. And if they were to like do the Scandinavian thing with pure tone no vibrato, it might be a little strange in their community.
Right.
So when we are performing something, it's important that we're not doing musical blackface, essentially.
Right.
We
And
don't
musical blackface is
pretend
something.
to be anybody other than we are. We can
Right.
present the music of a culturally diverse palette with the assumption that we are the people we are presenting this music.
Right. That's going to be something else. Like the musical blackface is something that's going to have a resurgence in music and music education very soon.
I already seen it. The Bob Phillips put up a version of "Lift Every Voice" already,
Ooh,
and
I haven't seen it yet, so I
it
don't.
may be it's the tune, the way that it appears in hymnals.
All right,
Uh,
I get it. But here's the other thing: is that we also have to realize that we can use several different tools to approach issues of race. Like, for example, if we were to use critical race theory, critical race theory done by Delgado back in the 70s and 80s, using critical race theory of how, and because CRT started from a legal perspective on how to address issues regarding race. Okay, but CRT can be applied in education. Critical race theory can be applied, especially in music education, with colored blindness. Because one of the things that I've recognized that a lot of us teachers are guilty of, and I will be one of the first people to say I'm guilty of this too, is that we do not pay attention to the voices that are not heard. We go with, this is what I know will work. This Elliot Delborgo piece will work. It's a winner every time. I need 4 minutes on a concert. Arlington sketches, go! It's going to work. Okay? Ain't nothing wrong with no Arlington sketches. Those down bows are fierce. Okay? We gotta love it. Okay? The High Ridge Overture. Down, down. I mean, we gotta do it. Okay? But, and this is a huge but, when it comes to being colorblind in music education, not really paying attention to those voices that are not heard, that actually does more, in my opinion, does more harm than good. Because we are not necessarily making our students as well rounded as we could. And it does not take much to make that happen. We just have to get out of our own comfort level and really explore and embrace. That's why when I see choir programs that are not attuned or accustomed to doing gospel, but they actually want to do gospel, and they figure out, okay, this is how you make this sound. Why do we make this sound? And they can really start to get into the nitty gritty of making those things happen. I feel like, all right, make it happen because they've done the lifting. You did the work. Thank you. That's all we require. Okay? Because I've been doing the work to play yo music right my entire life because that's kind of what my degree says that I'm supposed to do. And
but
I'm supposed to be
you
able to
gave me
play.
one thought and then you threw in another one, and
Yeah,
I'm going to draw on Dr. Robin DiAngelo 1,000 more times.
yeah.
But she talked about when in reference to her book White Fragility, that she gets comments from white people saying, well, now I feel like I'm walking on eggshells all the time to stop from offending. Well, think about how the people of color spend 98% of their lives around all the white people walking on eggshells to not trigger your white fragility. And it is not comfortable to talk about race. It is not easy. It is not fun. But we are going to get stuck on this eggshell world if we don't get past the hurt and the pain. And we're going to make mistakes. I'm going to have to ask for forgiveness 1,000 more times from the friends of mine who are people of color and ask to please explain to me, if you would please, what it was that I did that was upsetting, so that we can move forward, so that I can know and understand why what I said was inappropriate, and so that I can never say it again.
And here's the deal. I think this is one of the reasons why I have very few enemies or a few people that I don't get along with. I mean, I'm pretty sure there's somebody out there who was like, oh my gosh, I never want to see you again. But I can't really think of these people off the top of my head. But the reason why is that anytime that I do something, first things first, no matter what I say, if I said it, I said it. And I owned it. And if you said I said it, well, I said what I'm like very much like Nene Leakes in this. I said what I said when I said it because it's very true. I say what I say because I said it. Okay? And I tend to own that because I try to only say things that I actually mean. Which ain't hard. If I don't mean it, then I don't say it. I'll use tact before fact. Tact then fact, okay? I've always been that way. But then that sort of leads me to this whole entire concept of not only can I say and own everything that I say, I have this ability to get along with so many people. Because if I did something wrong, and if I said something I was not supposed to say, and you had a problem with it, then I'm actually going to listen to you. And the words that I've always said is, I hear you, and I can't wait to process your words. I appreciate you taking the time because you didn't have to do that. No one ever has to take the time to tell you that you're wrong. They can just call you a jerk and walk away, and then nothing ever gets solved. But in this case, I'm in an evolutionary state at all times because I choose to evolve.
And the hardest part is to go to someone that you have hurt, and
Right.
you don't get to decide whether or not they were hurt. You go to them and you have to ask, can you help me process the way in which that I hurt you, and accept if they say no.
Right. Because
that is the hardest part.
That is the hardest part because we've been like this since we were children. If we did something wrong, I'm sorry. You have that whole thing. Unless you have one of those scallions that are just like, are you really sorry though? Are you really sorry?
Well, you got to be willing to do that reparative, restorative work.
Yes,
and putting yourself out there by saying, will you allow me the opportunity to help me repair the damage that I have done to our professional or private relationship? That puts the ball in the victim's court.
Right.
And if they say no, I think even in that case, you have done, the most honorable thing you could possibly do to move forward.
Right. Correct.
But it's not easy.
And I think the thing is that the more and more that we go through our life, especially with the issues that we're having right now in regards to race and race relations and everything else, and I have plenty of people, because I search out very conservative voices on my Facebook.
I block nobody. I let everybody gets to talk.
And I'm like, I want to hear from you, especially now, because, there are some folks that are like saying, that, what happened to George Floyd, for example, is abhorrent and that should never have happened. But they take an issue with talking about race. And that makes that, I challenged them. I was like, I'm going to challenge you on this just because, and especially for my friends that I worked with or anything like that. And I was like, I'm going to challenge you because I care about you, and I want you to know how this affects me personally. And typically, I have a very calm demeanor. I've never said, "Well, you are wrong and you can't do." I don't do all that. I am very, very calm, and I try to make sure I have facts. And I probably am going to provide some type of article, a peer-reviewed or a scholarly journal article, and it will be in APA format.
Well, and part of that is
my jam right now.
Is never making a permanent choice. And I try to tell my students that, and this is, unanimous about life choices. I try to teach my students about life choices all the time, especially when it comes to do not make a permanent choice based on a temporary situation. So in the world of Facebook, if you are currently angry because you are related to a big family of people who are involved in law enforcement, and you are proud of that, and I got no problem with you being proud of that. I have no desire to put myself in their shoes. It's a hard job. But if you see a George Floyd post, and because you come from this background of law enforcement family, and you're ready to light somebody up for supporting the Black Lives Matter movement, okay, you may have just made a permanent decision based on a temporary feeling. Let's back up, let's zoom out, let's look at, this is the perspective you're coming from. Now, this post that you saw that made you so mad, who posted it, and where are they coming from?
Right.
And maybe the discussion you have isn't on Facebook. Maybe it's a phone call. Maybe it's in person. Because the whole world doesn't need to know your private problems.
Skippy, 1,000%. You know, I had a issue with a friend recently that said something, and it just seemed to be very dismissive to everything that's going on, and I know this person very well, and I know that that's not what they intended. However, that's definitely the way that it read. And so I actually called this person, and we had like an hour and a half discussion on it. And what was so productive about it is that that person now and I are even closer than we've been in the past. What makes that even better is that because dialogue was able to happen, we have to realize that social media sometimes is not the best place to have dialogue. If you can't have dialogue face to face, you need to have dialogue Zoom to Zoom, or FaceTime to FaceTime, or phone to phone. But because the thing is that you can't inflect tone into these, especially if you're using tone to prove a message or to stand by a position. You know, you have to be able to allow yourself those things.
Well, I can't see any way forward but through. And it's going to make a lot of people uncomfortable. My mama cat is probably rolling around in her grave, and she was not an unracist person, and I will say it that way. And I get a lot of perspective of how to live based on not living the way that she did.
I understand. Yeah, I get it.
And to some degree, I am glad that she doesn't have a voice in this conversation, because we need people who are ready to listen,
right,
and not dismiss. And there are lots of people out there who are not ready to listen yet, but I think we are at a breaking point where the voices need to be heard, whether you're ready to listen or not.
You're gonna listen. You're gonna listen or learn today. Because the thing is, and that some people call it Black Twitter. Black Twitter ain't friendly right now. Black Twitter ain't friendly. Black Twitter will cancel something so fast, I ain't got nothing to do with it. But it will cancel something so fast, all of a sudden, this business is doing real great. Somebody tweets something stupid, all of a sudden, I regretfully to inform you that this entire industry has shut down now. Thank you so much. You know, like, cancellation.
The principal trombone player of Austin Symphony, was it?
Whatever her name is. I know, listen, I don't know who
she is. A box of wine had to be involved with those comments. A sane person does not just up and say those things.
Sense to me. I was beside myself. I was like, ooh, Houston. I think it's Austin. Austin ain't playing. And the thing is, when they scrubbed.
Well, and people were initially upset with Austin Symphony because they didn't take immediate action. They went to the union first, and they showed them, this is what happened. This is the evidence we got. Are we within our rights to dismiss this person based on union contract, union rules?
Right.
And it was the union who made the final call and said,
yep,
you are absolutely within your right to dismiss this person, and we will not fight it.
Bye. Yep. Sorry. Sorry, not sorry. This is one of those things where it's like, I'm sorry, boo. We live in 2020 right now. I don't care who's in office. You can't do that. You cannot do that.
And
Well, freedom.
that's a person who
We
made
also have
a
freedom. We
permanent
also have
choice based on a temporary feeling. You
right.
permanently committed to racist comments based on some temporary anger you were feeling about a temporary issue.
You allowed your temp job to take your full time job. Oops. Oops. You allowed your temp feelings to take your full time job. That's not my problem. This is an evolutionary process for you. I'm sure you'll be doing really well with online marketing sales or whatever your new job's going to be. And here's the deal: she is an outstanding trombone player. She has accolades straight up and down. And I am not saying anything about her playing ability because I'm pretty sure that she's been a great teacher and a great trombone player and a great studio musician and blah blah blah, all those other things. Got nothing with that. It's literally the verbal diarrhea that came out of your mouth that just that was petulant and saturated the internet. And
Well,
now you Google her name,
you see nothing.
like, you barely find a picture.
You see the
Barely.
story.
You see the stories, and you see that there was a graveyard where her name used to be
Yep.
in the Austin Symphony Orchestra, but they scrubbed that clean. Even with past concerts, it's got scrubbed. It's like, oh, this program's not available.
Oh yeah.
Sorry.
Now
Amazing.
we were talking about color blindness, and
Right.
I think we need to move to what some people call color celebrate. I think we can maybe find a more academic way to say that doesn't seem.
Color celebrate.
Yeah,
Uh,
well, but that's what
color
we got
break.
for right now. So color blind, and the problem that I see with it, and help me out if I'm missing information, is that color blind assumes that you're going to treat treat everybody the way that you were treated, which assumes that everybody grew up the way that you grew up in the culture that you grew up
That is
in. Is the
definitely one.
problem with color blindness.
That is definitely one way of looking at it. So first off, when we take the definition of colorblind, just colorblind. Colorblind has like pretty much two different avenues. The first one is medical. It's like there are rods and cones in your eye that are not functioning the way things are and refracting light differently. So that is one version of colorblindness. Colorblindness in regards to how it relates to critical race theory and education or anything like that is really more of when we pretty much dismiss the actual racial identity of whomever you're speaking with. So if you say, oh, I don't see black children, I only see children, white, I don't care if you're white, yellow, purple, or green, you're all just children to me. Okay, the problem with that is that first of all, people aren't purple, people aren't green. People are white, beige, black, other colors. I mean, we have a whole hue and a spectrum to choose from, okay? Second is that when you choose not to address or acknowledge somebody's racial identity, then you pretty much, in my opinion, do something that's a little backwards. You almost cause a sense of declassification and desensitization of that. I want my little black children to know that they are black and they're beautiful and they're loved and they have beautiful hair. I want that to happen for my little black boys and my little black girls. Why? Because for the longest time growing up, they were told that their hair is nappy. They were told that their hair is ugly. They were told that you are not beautiful because you are black. This is awkward. And the thing is that systematically, when we go out into the world, if I was to go into a grocery store next to somebody that does not look like me, that looks like white or whatever, and we are walking the grocery store together, and it's a grocery store that has a lot of robberies or anything like that, who will probably get inspected closely? Who would get the most attention?
Before any suspicious behavior has even happened.
Right. And the thing is
And
that
it
it's not just
probably won't happen.
it's not just because I have big shoes. It's not because I probably smell like barbecue. It's probably because of the color of my skin. And that is awkward. Okay, so not to acknowledge that students are not black, or to not acknowledge that students are not white, or whatever the case may be, we just sort of desensitize everything, and that's not good. That's not good at all.
Well, here the lid I want to crack open so we can put a lid on the conversation
Yes.
is I feel that teachers are absolutely accountable for moving this race dialogue forward so that we can get through the problem. So
Absolutely.
how can teachers do a better job teaching anything, but maybe in particular orchestra, help to eliminate the color blindness problem where we don't
Mm-hmm.
see another person's culture or the way that
Yeah.
they're behaving because of the community that they live in,
Right.
and it's different. We can identify it as different, but how can we move to a place where we are not putting negative consequences or negative experiences on a person because they have a different color experience?
Not difficult. Easy question. Not, it's a hard question, but I think there's probably a simpler solution here, and that is incorporation. You've got to incorporate it into your daily things that you do. When you show an example of a violinist, instead of using Hilary Hahn, nothing against Hilary Hahn, that needs to be public. Hilary Hahn, you're amazing, and your Mendelssohn is delicious, delicious, delicious. Although, if I'm not mistaken, Nathan, I think I actually called you about, was it Elgar? It was the Elgar
Sibelius.
violin.
Her Sibelius
Sibelius,
is
thank you.
not
Oh,
her
thank you,
best
thank you,
work.
thank you. Yes, it was that one awkward passage. I was like, why does
It's
this
with the
sound different?
pizzicato in the third movement, and Maxim Vengerov is the one who's just like boom.
Okay. Okay. So happy because I remember I listened to a recording of that and I was like, why is this the only? What is going? I'm gonna call Nathan because I know Nathan would like really go into this violin geekdom a little bit further than any of my other friends, and so I'm
Oh,
so
and
happy
you
I
woke
called
me
you.
up for the middle of a nap, and the question, you know me so well. I went from asleep to this is why, Bruce, in like
I couldn't believe it. I just sorry. Small aside. Small aside. Okay. Anyway, getting back to where we get. Ain't nothing wrong with Hilary Hahn, but there's also other people that play this concerto, like Ty Murray, like Elena Orioste. I mean, there are plenty of people that have done this. The thing is that we just have to now incorporate these things inside the classroom. Okay, do something by a African American composer inside of your orchestra classroom. If you have money to get something commissioned, fabulous. There are plenty of African American composers out there that would be more than happy to write something within the realm and means of what you're trying to do. Means, not memes, but means of what you're trying to do. African American composer is Kevin Scott. Kevin Scott lives in in New York, I believe. I'm sure, and he's a working composer, meaning that he lives and eats compositions. You know,
as long as, and this is from a conversation I had with Dr. Quentin Morris, as long as you're not hiring that person just because they're black,
not just because they're black, right? You're hiring them because they
because they're a
actually are.
great composer.
They're a great composer, and you recognize their talent. Okay, black. It's not just the flavor of the month. It's not just the like, oh, 28 days, time to think about black people only. No, don't do that.
And
That's not it. We have Black History Month because we have to compartmentalize things, because that's what we intrinsically do as humans. We like to organize things, and this is, and I think I was talking to you earlier about this, Nathan, is that this is not the Martha Stewart of history, where we must have certain things in the rooms and the organizations and the shoe boxes. Gotta go. Sorry. No, okay, it's still history.
well,
If it's July 17th, still a day to learn about black people.
and
Okay.
my childhood, now this proximity is not like it's like you grew up with this culture and now you're washed clean of racism because of proximity. That is
Right.
not a thing. But I will say that growing up in the 90s in Washington State with
Yeah.
a Korean American governor, And the greatest musician in my world was Paul Elliott Cobbs.
Okay.
And so, as I was growing up as a young child, there was no indicator to me that my whiteness was necessarily an advantage because I had examples of people in positions of power that
Right.
did not look like me.
Right.
And I can't say for certain that the generation of students that I have examples out there of people
Right.
in positions of power that are not white and male.
Right. And this is why what the work that I do, what the work that Quentin Morris does, the work that James Ray does right now over at Western, the work, and I mean, we can look at this in Washington State. I believe there are only 6 African American music professors in the entire state. 6. 3 of us you know very well. The other 3 is there's a piano professor at UW, I believe. Nyaho Chapman is at
The
PLU, maybe.
vocalist, yeah.
No, he's a pianist. Uh, Nyaho Chapman. He lives in Seattle. I think he's at PLU. I think maybe I don't know. And then there's another jazz person in at WSU. Okay, 6 out of the entire state. Okay, we have value and we want to contribute, but the thing is that there's a lot of weight on our shoulders because of the expectation of, okay, you got that position because you earned it. It's not just because we're just trying to employ some diversity initiative. It's like, here you go, you're diverse. No, it's like we actually earned it. Now that we're here, a lot of other folks are looking at us, and hopefully, me personally, can inspire lots of students of color saying, yes, you too can work in a university system, in a college system. Okay, you too can achieve these things. Okay, and hopefully, those teachers that do not look like them also say these same things. You too can look like that person if you want to. You too can look like that person over there if you want to. And here's how.
And
That's very important.
where I would love to get with the color celebrate is
Calibrate. Calibrate.
celebrate. I'm not sure I'm
Calibrate.
super comfortable with that one either, but
I'm not comfortable with it either.
is that where we no longer see your color or your culturally upbringing as a barrier, and we've got lots of peer-reviewed studies that prove that it's not. I mean, this is like goal, and hopefully
This
near
is
in the future, probably far, hopefully
way
near,
down the line.
way down the line.
It's gonna be
Uh,
a list long in Google Scholar. We got a long list with that.
where no longer a barrier, but is a part of what makes you unique.
Correct. Right. It's identity, and it's about basically about finding that identity and running with it.
Mm.
And the thing that the identity is such an important part in for students. It's an important part for a school culture, and it's also very important for a teacher because a teacher is now put into a very unique identity.
Mm.
They have the identity that they have in their classrooms with their responsibility for students and the profession, but then they also have their identity when they go home, when they're separate. Sometimes those identities are 2 different people. Sometimes those identities cohabitate and are very blended. Sometimes those identities can provide lots of different issues depending on depending on race, depending on location where they live, depending on sexuality, depending on gender, depending on economic placement. I mean, there's so many. There's so many things that help make up an identity. And it's just really important that as we go forward and we have culturally relevant orchestra teachers that really want to make a change inside of the career and the curriculum, we just have to make sure that orchestra has to become an evolutionary process. If you need to do music by Drake inside of your orchestra because the bulk of your students want to do music by Drake, well, then we can find a way to make your orchestra classroom not only do Bach, Beethoven, and the Boys, but then also do Drake in a sense that it actually they're learning certain techniques and they're able to do it and they're able to participate in music that is relevant to them. Not
Yes.
everyone's going to find Schoenberg's string quartet in D major, the one that actually sounds tonal. It's not going to find that relevant to their 2021 lives,
Hmm.
okay? But they will find Billie Eilish very relevant in
Well,
certain
and
aspects.
symphony orchestras who think they can check their diversity box by doing one overture by Samuel Coleridge Taylor. Well, Samuel Coleridge Taylor sounds like Elgar mixed with Mahler mixed with Dvorak.
Hey, we
It's
you
it's
know
not, it lacks relevance. Now, we're still celebrating a composer of color,
right.
absolutely. But if you're trying to make a relevant statement about composers who are black or composers who are just not white, then
Right.
it also needs to be relevant.
Right. You better be hitting up Quinn Mason. I mean, Quinn Mason just was going to have a piece done by the what's the orchestra that's in Seattle? Not Seattle Symphony. What's this
Seattle
orchestra?
Collaborative Orchestra,
It's
Festival
the
Orchestra,
my gosh,
Philharmonic.
it's Will White is the director. Will White. Will White is the new director. Is the orchestra Seattle Chamber Orchestra. They it's OCCS. There's a lot of consonants involved.
It's hard to throw a rock in Seattle and not hit a community orchestra. So I'll be honest with you, I have no idea.
Oh my gosh, it's going to grab me nuts. So hold on. Uh, 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 hold on. I'll just type in Will White Orchestra and then I'll find it. Because Lord help me. Oh, the OSSCS. That's it. Orchestra. Hold on. Orchestra Seattle, and Seattle Chamber Singers. There we go. Orchestra Seattle and Seattle Chamber Singers.
Okay.
The thing is that they were originally going to have a concert here and do a composition by Quinn Mason. Quinn Mason is like a very young brother out there, like killing it with some compositions and stuff. Its music is pretty legit. But the point is that there are a lot of African American composers right now that can't get anything played. If we do this, we have to start addressing the whole idea about the hegemony of choosing orchestral music and programming and repertoire selection. Yannick over in
Is it Seguin?
and yeah, he pushing some boundaries. It was like every single concert will have something different. Bam! And he's like putting women on there.
Well, and it's not hard to do.
It's
I
not.
If
There's so
I
many.
hear a Brahms symphony in the next 10 years, I will vomit everywhere. Because
I'm
compositionally, what Brahms does, I will never be able to do. It's structurally very impressive. It's like architecture. It's beautiful. But are you going to leave a concert of people that are not into symphonic music, people who are going because it's a night out at the symphony? Are they going to
right.
leave singing a melody from a Brahms symphony?
Maybe. I mean, I would, but I mean that. But I'm not. I'm
But
not
we
looking
love
at
it. We are in it. Somebody
we're like no, 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 chicken wings.
who just taking
Whatever.
Aunt Sally and Uncle John to the symphony, are they going to leave Brahms 4 with a melody to whistle?
They would probably say, "Where's that REO Speedwagon? I need a little bit more of that." Like I'm
But
just saying, I can use REO Speedwagon just
but
as a
if
random.
they went to a concert and they hear Dance on Number 2 by Arturo Marquez,
Okay, that's a bop.
they're going to have a glass of wine when they get home and they're going to do some samba.
Hey, that's a bop. That's inspirational. See, the thing is that the audience plays a huge part in what type of music happens. If you have a conservative environment where if you don't do these pieces, your bread and butter pieces, you ain't gonna sell no tickets. You ain't gonna sell no tickets. You can't pay your musicians. You can't pay your musicians. You might as well not have an orchestra. You can have a
Mhm.
YouTube channel. That's about it. I mean, like, what else you got? I mean, but so I mean, you have to really somewhat bring that in. But I feel that even as a conductor myself, and if I was to have a orchestra like that, well, I mean, I have my youth symphony, and I am very progressive in regards to some of the compositions that I choose to do with that group. For example, we did Haunted Topography by David T. Little. This piece is accessible, because you know me and accessibility. I'm very much a big person in accessibility, and it's a contemporary position. But it was about basically this. It's about this story where this woman lost her son in Vietnam, I believe, but has never seen the map of where her son actually dies. So David T. Little created this piece called Haunted Topography.
Oh,
And starting off the first, first half of the piece, it's very, very somber, very, very creepily still. But then all of a sudden, when you get to the second half of the composition, it is like pure chaos and pure pandemonium. It's loud. It's scary at times. It's extreme. There is things where the piano is doing something that's very minimalistic, but is extremely highly functional and rhythmically speaking. Those pieces right there, when I was to do that with my kids, they were like, this is amazing. We want to play this again and again and again, because they were able to connect it to history. They were able to connect it to, the story actually made sense. The composition and the elements made sense. It all connected together. That doesn't mean that an African American composer can't do that same thing. Okay? Sure, we already know what Beethoven does. Da 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 da. We got that. But what about this person over here that might make something that is just as powerful that the world needs to know about?
well,
And
and sorry, go ahead.
the only people that can make this happen are people like me, are people like conductors. Conductors are the ones that make this happen. Conductors are the ones that have to convince their board, you need to do this. And then those same conductors need to convince the audience, folks, you need to sit down and listen to this. And then do it and be like, see, I told you. This is really, really important.
A perspective that I got from a middle school choir teacher that I think every symphony orchestra conductor, from youth symphonies to high school orchestras to professional orchestras, need to hear and understand and apply, is that, and Dan Davison is his name. We work together in Puyallup School District. He's like the most selling choral composer for intermediate choirs on JD with Pepper. And his rule is that music needs to make you feel something, or he says it better. It needs to make you move or move you.
Okay, all right.
So it needs to make you dance, or it needs to make you have some feels.
Okay.
And if you are looking at programming and every single piece, if you can't say it does one of those things, get it out of here. Because Egmont Overture, I think you could get some feels.
I can get some feels with that.
And if you're crazy like me, it's going to make you move too. The doot, 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 doot.
I mean, that's a bop. That's a bop. Like bam. Bam. I mean,
yep.
You got this. I mean, that right there, boom. You good, But if you just, and don't get me wrong, we have to also realize I'm one of these people that I actually don't mind something from the second Viennese school. Inside of a chamber music.
And that's knowing your audience. That maybe the right audience, the suite from Lulu is gonna make the audience feel something.
You're gonna feel something. I'm gonna tell you what you're gonna feel. But, nine. Ah!
But if you're a high school orchestra teacher and you're doing Arlington sketches and Lion City and give me one more. Just totally vanilla. It's not gonna make you feel nothing.
Oh gosh, I can't say Rosa Mitre. That's a beautiful piece.
I love Rosa Mitre. We just did it.
Yeah, Rosa Mitre is beautiful. Let's see. So you mean just very vanilla? Ain't no feels. It's just sort of like okay.
Where it's like within the first 30 seconds, it was written for junior high.
Oh, Dragon Hunter, SUNY New Bowl.
Mm-hmm.
Or man, there's just so many things you could say here.
So if that's your concert, is the audience going to leave feeling like, wow, orchestra is a place where they're making art. They are moving and shaking and they are doing things. And I think for a 5th or 6th grade orchestra to do Dragon Hunter, I'm going to feel things, because moving your bows and they're using the whole D minor scale, I'm feeling things. But a high school orchestra concert, you've been playing violin or cello for 6 or 7 years, and you're doing. I mean,
Now,
difficulty aside.
now, see, here's the deal. Now, my pushback for that will be, how are you playing it? Because if you are playing Dragon Hunter, like one of the things I did in Sunnyside is that my chamber orchestra had to be able to play grade 1 pieces to perfection. We're talking about every single nuance, every single dynamic, all those changes. And I actually remember for 1 year, I think it was in 2012, so I think it's the class of 2012, I took my 6th grade and 7th grade music, and we did a recording session for 3 days in a row. A recording, 2 days in a row. We did a 2 days in a row recording session with the chamber orchestra right there in class, and we had to prepare. And they, at the end, they were like, "That was so much harder when the red light comes on." You
Uh-huh.
don't say. All of a sudden, there's no room for error. Now all of a sudden, when they went back to go do like Percy Fletcher folk tune and fiddle dance, it
Yep.
made so much. Oh, yes, the amount of detail that went to their playing just increased sevenfold. It was
Yes.
outstanding. And I was like, what was this? What was this in November? Now all of a sudden you do it now? What?
Well, and I have seen that because I am somebody who has twice now taken over for a master teacher.
Uh-huh. I get
So
it.
when I come into Puyallup and I'm taking over for Christy Preheim, she knows what she's doing.
Right.
And I just pull things off the shelf because I don't know what they've played before. And I just want to see, what do you like? What can you do? And Dragon Hunter was what we did with the 9th graders at Puyallup. We played this last year. And the whole first violin section played C sharp on the they all played C sharp, every single one of them. It's like, oh, you played this, and then I think it wasn't last year, but 2 years before, James had done Rosa Midra with the symphonic orchestra, and when the first violins went up for that 7th position, high G,
Haji,
we
make it.
were. It was like we were learning it for the first time. So
Here's the deal. This is something that orchestra teachers have a responsibility. Is the responsibility is to teach your orchestras humility, because humility will get you very far. It don't matter if the person that's in the front is an all-state musician, and the person in the back is the star athlete of the football team. I don't care who you are. We're humble and we work together in this entire ensemble. We are all here together, and while this might be unbelievably easy for you, that is your privilege, and that is your recognition for doing that. Now, this person back here is struggling. What can you do? Can you go and up your game and now learn how to teach it? Because here's the deal: teaching is the highest form of understanding, period. If you can teach it and you can explain it 3, 4, 5 different ways, and somebody says, "Oh, I get it now. Thank you so much," and move on, that's when you know you really know it. Because you can ask somebody to make you something, they'll be like, "Okay, what are you doing to it?" "I don't know." And then it's delicious. Then you try to do it, it becomes trash. If you can teach it, man, you unstoppable. And I think that by teaching it, it actually makes you a better musician. And I don't think there are some orchestra teachers, some orchestra teachers fail to realize that. Is that, or I should say, not orchestra teachers, excuse me, some orchestra students fail to realize that because they're still, in that learning stage themselves, which is great and all. But I also make sure that my juniors and seniors know how to teach 6th and 7th graders,
yes,
and by doing so, all of a sudden it highlights deficiencies in their own playing. It
yes.
highlights deficiencies that they might they know about, but they tend to be
I
able to.
can't tell you how many times me walking through something with a cello player taught me how I learned to play violin and,
Exactly.
and never understood. But I
And
think
that's
for two people who are really, really good at talking at length about topics, I think we maybe need to start thinking about wrapping up this conversation.
right.
So
Okay. So,
oh, go ahead.
oh,
I don't want to
no,
stop
no,
you.
I was just saying. Anyway, you're right. That this is we work very well together, Nathan, and there's lots of different things to talk about. I'm pretty sure we can talk about for a very long time.
I think we're going to need a second or third or fourth installment.
Feel free to break this up into multiple segments. I don't really care.
Oh, well, we'll talk about it off camera. But I've got one question that I ask all of my guests.
Yes.
Is that if you could be transported back to a time in your life when there was something that you needed to hear to either encourage you or to absolve yourself of something or to make a different choice, what would you go back and tell your past self?
Ooh, something I would have to tell my past self. Something I would tell my past self. I don't know. That's a really, really good question. Because there are so many things that I have learned in my life now as an adult that I was not aware of. I know what I would say. I would say, while you are going to be one of the most kind, giving, and thoughtful people around, you also have to make sure you protect yourself and make sure you know who you can trust and know who is out to just use you. I think that that would be something that I would be that I would tell. And the thing is that I have made plenty of mistakes in my life. I mean, nothing, like catastrophic that destroys a career. No. I mean, they could be like, like first year teacher mistakes, like, I use a cell phone in class, like whatever. Okay. There's something like that. But nothing to the detriment of like losing a career over or anything like that. That just doesn't compute. That doesn't exist in my realm of processing things. But there are people that I trusted that I shouldn't have trusted, or I should say, didn't necessarily have my best interest in at heart. And so it's never been any of my teachers. My teachers have always been fine, and my teachers are the ones I've trusted 100%, and they have never led me in the wrong direction. So teachers are great. It was really more of being in that adult realm, being, having your first professional teaching job or whatever the case may be, and trusting blindly some leadership without asking questions. Mm-hmm. And the thing is that asking questions is going to be a very important thing depending on the profession you choose. Mm-hmm. So, for example, if you choose the Army, don't question, because that's not your job. You just need to execute. You will be able to question later, but especially if it's basic training, don't question. But if you are a teacher, question if you see questionable leadership. If you are a nurse or a doctor and you see something awkward, question it. Because if you're a police officer and you're in the police industry, question it if it's awkward and it should not exist. Loyalty only goes so far. But if loyalty starts to blend to doing things that goes against what you personally believe, then something needs to be done. Barring legal responsibility. I mean, look, if it's legal and you're having
put a finger on something I've been feeling for so long, is there are professions where there can be no bad apples.
Right.
And there are times when we have that argument, well, you can't throw the bunch out with the bad apples, or the bad apple out with the bunch. Right. There are certain professions where everybody needs to be beyond reproach. I think clergy, education, law enforcement, or anybody in the judicial system, doctors, and
these people make permanent. They make permanent things. They make permanent decisions. Permanent. I mean, like a doctor snips something in the wrong place but then tries to cover it up. That's a permanent issue. If you don't own up to it. Let's see. Education. If you're doing something psychologically damaging to a child, that is a permanent issue.
And you may not know you're doing it.
Right, and that those things right there are really really important. These professions are not easy. Anybody that says, "Oh, teaching is so easy," teaching ain't easy, girl. Where y'all be? I'm tired. I'm
Being a
tired.
lousy teacher maybe is easy, but being a
Right,
good teacher that is informed and using best practice and thinking
right,
about the social, physical, and emotional well-being of a
right.
child, not easy.
Not easy. And the thing is, yeah, we can teach the content. The content's whatever. It's going to the content exists 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. The content will always be there. But
Mm.
we have to realize that there is so much more about in the education industry. You are a counselor. You are a listener. You know all your students' names. You know what they like. You know what they don't like. I mean, you bear the weight of if a student is having a bad day. What do? If there's a conflict between two students in your room, what do? And nowadays with teachers, you have a lockdown. There's a shooter in your building. What do? You have an immense responsibility of taking care of somebody else's child, not only mentally, but physically if you have to, and emotionally when it's necessary. That is a large responsibility. So that's why that profession needs to be above reproach, as you say. You know, there are some things in here that, some professions that you don't need no bad apples. And so therefore, if you see a bad apple, or if you have an administration taking you in an awkward direction, hey, you need to do something about that, or say something about that, or inquire about that safely. Because again, at the end of the day, by not saying anything, you tacitly comply with whatever's happening. And tacitly complying with the awkwardness that you saw, but you chose not to say anything because you didn't want to get in trouble, that's not right. And you know it's not right. And then all of a sudden, 20 years later or 10 years later, you're like, man, I should have said something. You don't say.
Mhm.
You don't say. No, you can live with that on your conscience and don't expect anyone to say, oh, I understand. No, we won't. No, we won't. I'm
Well,
not going to understand.
before we put a pin in this, I think it it would be worthwhile to maybe say something for the minority students that I have, that if injustice was done to them while I was around, I was likely unaware of it, and it may have come from me, may have come from a teacher, may come from
Mm-hmm.
another student.
Right.
What can you tell for my orchestra students that are the only person that looks like them in the room,
That was
so
me.
that they can persevere and still feel like they are part of the group where they are the only?
Right. So, one thing that I had to quickly realize, one thing I did realize in um, in growing up. Let's see if I actually have a picture of this. I'm going to show you a very embarrassing photo.
Oh, please do.
Uh,
I'm so ready.
I kid you not. Okay, hold on. I'm gonna bring it up right
Oh,
now.
is it the one with the glasses I seen on Facebook?
No, go away. Yes. Oh my god. Yes. It's that exact same one. Hold on. I'm pulling it up right now. Cause I can't. This is so embarrassing, but it's also very very real. Uh, Wait for it. Almost there. Almost there. I have to get through all of her kids. Oh my gosh, she had so many kids. I mean, yeah, she should have her kids, but I'm trying to find like where is that photo? Oh, I know what I need to do. I know what I need to do. I need to go here, timeline, and then I'm going to go to photos, and then I'm going to go Mary's photos. Oh my gosh, this is so embarrassing. Hold on. Just wait for it. It's coming. Oh, there it is. Oh, so awkward. Okay, I'm gonna share my screen with you.
Please.
Do I have share? Do I have screen share capable? Oh, could you enable screen sharing?
I think you got it now.
Okay, great. Thank you. Um, so if you take a look at this photo right here, you can tell that
Oh, baby Bruce.
this no question about it. this is me in 8th grade in 1996 at Music in the Parks. In Chicago, we were doing orchestra festival. So, as you can see, this was my middle school orchestra. And these are all the 8th graders. Everybody from Bob Parkin on the left all the way over to Mary White, the orchestra director on the right. Cello section going from left to right. Yes, Cindy, Andy, Sarah, myself, Laura, Sarah, and Scott Robidoux. So I mean, like, yeah, all of us. This is it. This is the people I graduated with, right? And one thing, and even right behind me is like one of my best friends, Melinda Richardson, right there. Melinda was now Melinda Lamb, but Melinda was one of my best people. Her father was my counselor in middle school. So it's my 6th grade, 7th grade, 8th grade counselor. And when I said I wanted to do orchestra in 7th grade, he had to switch my schedule around and make those things happen. And I don't know if he knew it, but I was going to be probably one of the only African Americans in this very white orchestra, you know? And I didn't think anything of it because when at this age right here, of course I saw color. And of course it had, affected me, but I had so much love around me that from my teachers that I was almost insulated and shielded from any of this. As I got older, on the other hand, then I started to recognize, well, wait a minute, why is this happening? Why? And I didn't really have a lot of answers. The one thing that made all of this so much easier is that I had open communication with my teachers. I had open communications with the people I went to school with, and I had open communications with people that did not look like me. And so they really did just see me as Bruce Walker, the tallest person in the entire ensemble. Okay, they saw me as Bruce Walker, this cellist that just goes around and will you know will try to sing Arlington sketches, just because it's a Tuesday. At like I've had friends that are like, "Hey, let's do our festival music while we go on the bus to do da 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 da." And so we're like, we'll hum through all of our parts, we'll sing through our parts while we're on our way to a competition or whatever, just because we're that nerdy and that geeky. I connected with people not just because of race and the color of skin, but I was able to connect because we all had a common goal and a common interest. In orchestra programs, that's where these things are built, and that's where these things are felt, and that's where these things are held together. And I believe that with an orchestra teacher that recognizes this and incorporates some of the things that's very normal to them, like I'm thinking, like if you have a Hispanic student and you're doing a piece that is of Hispanic heritage, or anything like that. Not just de colores, not the simple stuff, but we're talking something that's like deep, deep, deep. We're getting really rich in there, and you're learning more about it, and you are the one. The teacher is the one teaching about this heritage, and you're teaching it well, and you're teaching it correctly. That will give legitimacy to that student of color. It legitimizes their culture and it incorporates it into the overall classroom environment. So, as a student of color, there's nothing wrong with asking your teacher to challenge them to say, hey, can we do stuff like this? If you have a teacher that is perceptive to those things. Now, some teachers are not perceptive to those things. Some teachers are very comfortable doing only the Tchaikovskys and only the Janáčeks and only the Dvorak's, and that's because that is the music that they feel that is the only thing that I need to teach. I only need to teach you, and that's it. I have nothing else to do with you. But then you'll have the teachers like yourself, Nathan, who will actually listen and actually want to participate in culturally relevant pedagogy to build a society inside of your ensembles.
And I can still do so much better. I mean, I am
Right.
not the pinnacle. I have a lot more to do.
Right. I mean, and I say this as an African American orchestra director. I even I can do more. I can do more things with my own race and do more things by Black composers. I don't feel like I do enough, But I also I'm doing the balancing act as a conductor. But I too have work to do, and I think that's something that all of us can realize. No one is going to do this perfect. And no one is going to make this happen correct on the first try.
Mhm.
It's going to take multiple attempts. It's going to get messy. And we have to be the ones to recognize that and say, this is okay. Let's continue the fight. Okay? That's number one. Number two is for your students of color, just because you don't see anyone that looks like you in this industry does not mean there is not space for you. Sometimes you have to work twice as hard to get there. That is not your fault. That sometimes is just the fault of the system. And until we can address the injustice that it occurs, because I love the there's this infographic with Shel Silverstein's like giving tree, where you have like the whole idea between inequality, then you have equality, then you have equity, and then you have justice.
Oh, is that
You
with,
know,
the fence and the boxes?
but it's not that. It's actually the tree. The tree. It's this adorable tree, and I think I might have it
Yeah, go ahead and show
on.
me.
Yeah, I do. I will. Let's see. Is this it? Oh, good. I do have it. I'm so happy. I'm just like a world share of everything. It's this little tree right here. This little guy right here. Where inequality and unequal access to opportunities. Notice on this side of the tree is
This is
not many
beautiful.
apples. This is very lots of apples here. Equality? Question mark. Where everybody gets the same thing, but look at the tree. It's still slanted over here.
It didn't take
So
care of access.
right, that take right. So then we go to equity. Well, we need a taller apple here or taller chairs here. You get this one right here. But even with equity, it's still unbalanced. It's about justice that happens at the bottom, where we fix the tree. The tree is what gets fixed and pulling it aside. So now this way, you can use the same thing for everybody, and you can still get everything that you need. Okay. Now, a counter to this is that, well, why doesn't this person just give this person something this way? Well, then we just turn right back to square one. It's just a
Because now that
circle.
that other person is still other.
Right. That other person is just other. Okay. And then so we return back to this argument of going around in a circle, round and round and round. And so we can just keep trying to do this until we can get justice and actually fix the system that is slanted or broken. And so this way that it is now really the equity and equality. Now we can use equality. We can use equality when we have justice. But if we ain't got no justice, you can't give no equality. I've always loved this. I've always loved this one. This is probably my favorite one I've anything I've seen. And I think Melinda Lamb, actually, who was in one of my best friends in school orchestra. Melinda Lamb is the one that actually had this on her Facebook, and I was like, and we will take that because that one's really nice. She even made the suggestion of, I wish the people were not just white, is that we had like
Mm.
blue and orange. That actually works out somewhat fairly well, or actually square and triangle. Okay, right, that could work too. Turn into a shape. So anyway, that's all I got. Just don't. I think at the end of the day, just because someone doesn't look like you doesn't mean that this profession isn't for you, and it doesn't mean that you can't participate and you can't learn to play the violin. You most certainly can play the violin, the cello, the double bass. You have every right to do so. Do so proudly, because the number of people that look like you that can do this is not as many as you think there is. And so therefore, you now are a person that has contributed to the progression to make this instrument more accessible, and people will look up to you. I know that I had the opportunity to go teach down at the Atlanta Cello Workshop back in February, and I cannot tell you how happy I was to see so many little black children play the cello. I had selfies galore, and we're talking like there was like the room was filled with black children, and for me that was huge because I am so used to being the only person of color inside of an ensemble, and it's the person that's in charge of directing it or conducting or leading as principal cello or whatever the case may be. There's so much that can be said. And if you have that ability to be the person that can sit there and really offer those suggestions, that's a very powerful statement.
Well,
And people will take notice right away.
we were talking earlier about going to college, and I'll let this be the capstone before I keep talking for another hour. Uh, is the allowing students to have some agency about their future.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think we in education do a great job of asking students in
What they
thoughtful ways
mm-hmm.
what they want to do with their lives.
Right.
And so something that I do, and this is informed from a number of different sources, is I ask students to think about what are skills, and if not skills, personality traits that
Mm-hmm.
are unique to you.
Mm-hmm.
Or just values that you have that are special to you. What are things that are special to you? And there's one student in particular that I don't think gets a lot of positive attention from their other teachers,
Right.
but they are somebody that people flock to.
Uh-huh.
This is a person that has a large and tightly knit group of friends
Mm-hmm.
and can convince this group of people to do anything.
Really? Sounds like politics.
And could convince them to do good or ill, which is that's maybe their struggle.
That's the struggle.
But I was having a conversation with this person about being worried about what they're going to do with their future.
Mm-hmm.
Said, well, you are a leader. You're clearly a leader. You are a communicator, and you have a powerful ability to convince people to see your vision, whatever it is. And let's make a list. What are professions where that skill set could be useful? Certainly a teacher. If you can influence young minds to see Washington State history as something that's interesting and exciting because you have this ability to convince people that it is, because as a teacher, you got to get kids excited about things that are just boring, but you got to get people excited. Right. A politician, because we need people who can get a room full of bored, tired old white men to change their minds. We need somebody who is exciting and can do that.
Right.
Or right. Any number of management type positions or sales where those skills could be useful. But just because you haven't had a job doesn't mean you can't think about what would you be well suited for and be able to enjoy, with no shame about if you choose sales over politics.
Right.
Because we need plumbers, like you said. And Lord knows we need more teachers that want to be teaching.
Want to be teaching. Want. W-A-N-T. Want.
Because if you do it for the money, you crazy.
Child, you gonna have an early grave. Early grave. But like, I guess I'm gonna teach 4 more classes, and just gotta get more money while teaching. It's like you gonna have an early grave.
My first 3 years of teaching, I had days where I did not know if I would survive that day.
Ooh, the days. I remember one. This is straight up. I'm dead serious. I kid you not. There was one of these days. I think it was like a summer. I don't know what it was. I had a project that I was working on in Sunnyside, and I got so tired. I literally went to sleep in my office and then woke up, brushed my teeth, changed clothes because that's kind of awkward in middle school and high schools. They notice everything. Change clothes, which I had to change of clothes in my office, and just continued on with my day as if nothing actually happened. And then went right back in my office, start working again. And again, at this time, I'm like young teacher, so I'm like 25, 26 years old. I'm like, I can stay at school for 5 days in a row. This is great. Child, that's not sustainable. That's not sustainable at all. So, we have to, at least in this profession, as orchestra teachers, we have to take care of ourselves. And don't get me wrong. Yes, you want to do something that's extraordinary for your children. And yes, you should do something that's extraordinary for your children. Yes, you should give it 120%. But don't forget, you still got to be alive to do all that. You got to be alive. I mean, every once in a while, because you got a deadline, okay, things magically
You got to
happen.
push it every now and again.
You can push it every now and then. You can push it a little bit. Like, what's that? Salt and pepper? Push it. Good. Push it. Yeah, you can push your sanity just a little bit because that's what teachers do. Teachers are trying to constantly put that fitted sheet over the bed, so they have to like go over this way and do this and do that and scroll this and go this way. You're like, no, and you're not going back, and you're trying to just put everything all in order. And eventually, it all gets in. You're like, then time goes by. Okay, I gotta take this sheet off. Dang it. Then it just sort of just flies off the bed, and it's like, oh no.
Well,
So
I hope the poor souls who watch this interview have as much fun listening to it as I had making it. But I
well,
think it's time to wrap it up and say goodbye.
absolutely,
I've got some more questions off camera, but thank you so much, Bruce. And I know
absolutely.
this is
Thank
going to
you.
be meaningful for so many people who watch this.
Well, I hope so, child. Listen, if you ever need to get in contact with me, I'm associate professor of music at Columbia Basin College in Pasco, Washington. You can easily email me at bwalker@columbiabasin.edu. I'm around for a wedding and bar mitzvahs and barbecue, especially barbecue. I know how to barbecue very well.
All right. Thank you so much, Bruce.
Absolutely. Thanks, Nathan.